Well, hello and welcome back. Principles of Accounting 2. I'm your host, Dr. B, and today we're going to be covering activity-based costing. The concept of activity-based costing is allocating cost based on activities. So earlier we learned in job-based costing and process-based costing, we learned how to allocate cost based on departments. Okay? Departments are very similar to respective activities. Activities are the activities performed in the manufacturing process. They can also be defined as uh, a driver behind a cost. For example, we measure the use of a lawn mower in hours, not in miles. We measure a forklift in hours, not in miles. We measure a car in miles, a vehicle in miles. Those are activity-based drivers. We'll talk a lot about it. Okay, so as you know, the total cost of a product is direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. You know that. We've been talking about that for a while. Direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. The three of those added together are the total cost of a product. Direct materials and direct labor are direct cost. Factory overhead is an indirect cost. When we talk about factory overhead as an indirect cost, we need to allocate factory overhead to the product based on the fact that it's an indirect cost. There are three primary methods that we use to allocate factory overhead costs to a product. The first method is called the single plant-wide rate method. This is where we apply the same rate of overhead to all products that we produce. Same exact. Doesn't matter how long the product takes to make, doesn't matter the amount of materials or labor or anything like that. Single plant-wide rate method, we just take the same rate and apply it to all products. The second primary method is called the multiple production department rate method. In this method, we apply factory overhead based on the respective departments within the manufacturing aspect. For example, I would apply a different rate of overhead to the assembly department and a different factory overhead rate to the manufacturing department or the welding department or whatever. Multiple department rate. And the third method of allocating factory overhead is called activity-based costing method, which is what this chapter is all about. And here we allocate factory overhead based off of the individual activities. We'll talk about all three. Okay? But we're going to focus out, of course, on activity-based costing. And these are the primary three for determining factory overhead rate. Companies typically will choose the three based off of which one is the most beneficial to the company, which one is the most accurate for the company. Now, in this example, we're going to use a company that manufactures both snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers. This company, Ruiz Company, they manufacture both snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers. And I'm going to use that same example for all three methods. So that way it helps you to best understand the concept. In the single plant-wide rate method, we apply the same rate across the entire company, as I had said earlier. So let's take a look at our example. Our company manufactures both snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers. We have a total factory overhead budget of $1.6 million for the year. We are planning to utilize 20,000 labor hours for the year. We're going to use 10,000 labor hours to create 1,000 snowmobiles, and we're going to use 10,000 labor hours to create 1,000 riding lawnmowers. Using the single plant-wide rate method, which is the easiest one to calculate, is the most simplistic method. To calculate the single plant-wide rate method, we simply take the total budgeted factory overhead divided by the total budgeted plant-wide allocation base. The allocation base is the unit for the measure of activity. In our example, it's in labor hours. So, to calculate the single plant-wide rate method, we take the $1.6 million of factory overhead budget divided by the 20,000 hours of our allocation base for direct labor hours to get $80 per hour of the single plant-wide rate. Everyone with me so far? Makes sense, right? This is the easiest one. Okay. Oh, sorry. One too fast. Okay. So the way it works is we take our single plant-wide rate and we multiply that by the number of labor hours it takes to create one unit. It takes our company 10 hours of direct labor to create one snowmobile. It also takes our company 10 hours to create one riding lawnmower. So we take the overhead rate of $80 per direct labor hour times the total direct labor hours used to create one unit equals the total factory overhead per unit. So in our example, we take $800 of factory overhead per unit for both snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers. So again, to calculate the factory overhead rate for single plant-wide method, take your total budget for overhead, 1.6 million, divided by your activity base rate, in this case 20,000 hours, equals $80 per hour of single plant-wide rate, and we take that $80 times the number of hours it takes to create one unit. 80 times 10 is $800 of overhead per unit. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Hope you're not all sleeping. I know it's, not that entertaining. Advantages of using this method is very easy. It's very inexpensive to implement. Some of the challenges is it does not take into consideration different costs across different products. and it doesn't really take into consideration the manufacturing process. So, in my opinion, yeah, it's easy to use, but it's probably not the best one to use because it's too easy, right? It's probably not the most accurate. Now let's talk about the multiple department method for applying factory overhead. When we have multiple departments, the factory overhead are different in each department. That makes sense because we are going to use different hours in each department. So in this case, the factory overhead costs are probably going to be more accurate than the single plant-wide rate method. When we're looking at multiple departments, we use different rates for each department. Whereas the single plant-wide method is just one rate. So in our example, when we are manufacturing lawnmowers and snowmobiles, we have two different departments that are responsible for manufacturing the products. The first one is called the Fabrication Department. This is where they weld and shape the bodies of they fabricate the metal. Okay, they mold the metal, they shape it. And that department is responsible for molding that metal. And then the other department that we use is the Assembly Department. They put the engine in, they put the wheels on, they put the blades on for both the snowmobile riding lawnmower. Yeah? And both those departments work together, well, individually and together, to create the product. But as you would expect, there is factory overhead that gets applied to each department, hence the name, multiple department method. Okay, so in our example, we have a total budget of factory overhead of $1.6 million. $1,030,000 of those dollars is budgeted for fabrication. They shape the metal. Yep. $570,000 of the total 1.6 is allocated to assembly. They put the pieces together to create the final product. So here's the formula. We take the budgeted department factory overhead divided by the budgeted department allocation base. Simple. Budgeted department factory overhead divided by the budgeted department allocation base. $1,030,000 divided by 10,000 equals $103 per direct labor hour for the fabrication department. For the assembly department, the budget for factory overhead is $570,000 divided by 10,000 labor hours for that department equals $57 per direct labor hour. It takes 10 hours to create one snowmobile and 10 hours to create one riding lawnmower. For snowmobiles, it takes 8 hours in fabrication and 2 hours in assembly. For riding lawnmowers, it's 2 hours in fabrication and 8 hours in assembly. But they both get to 10 hours. But we know that the rates will be different. And the reason for that is because of the allocation of overhead for each department. Now, we see for the snowmobile, the total factory overhead per unit is $938. How did we get there? 8 hours of fabrication times $103 per direct labor hour for the fabrication department of factory overhead equals $824. For assembly, 2 direct labor hours times $57 per direct labor hour of overhead for the assembly department equals $114. You add 824 plus 114 from fabrication and assembly equals total factory overhead per snowmobile of $938. You apply that same concept to the riding lawnmowers. Riding lawnmowers factory overhead is $662. Now you can see that it's significantly different than the single plant-wide rate method. We'll look at that difference. This is this nice graphic representation. Yeah. We'll look at the difference. The single plant-wide rate method, the allocation was $800 per unit for both snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers. Remember, single plant-wide means the whole company, yeah, regardless of the units being produced. In the multiple production department method, snowmobiles is $938, riding lawnmower is $662. That's a difference of $138. So based off of this information, we can see that the multiple production method is more accurate than the single plant-wide method. We call the differences between the two methods, we call these distortion costs. Distortion cost. Distortion means difference. Distortion means difference. So we see that the distortion cost for snowmobiles is undercosted by $138. And for riding lawnmowers, it's overcosted by $138. Distortion means difference. The distortion cost for the fabrication department and assembly department are different based off of the allocation of the overhead. In the single plant-wide rate, it doesn't. The distortion cost cannot be really identified. What does this information help us do? It helps us to identify differences in production department factory overhead rates. And it also helps us to identify the differences among products within and across departments. This information helps us in the planning, design, and quality of our products. Now, it's important that we find the ratio of allocation base usage within each department. This information tells us how well we are utilizing our departments. And to find that, we take the direct labor hours for one product divided by the direct labor hours of the other product for each department. For example, in the fabrication department, we use 8 hours for snowmobiles and 2 hours for riding lawnmowers. It's a 4-to-1 ratio. That tells me I'm using 4 more hours or usage for snowmobiles than I am for riding lawnmowers. The opposite is true in the assembly department because 2 hours for snowmobiles and 8 hours for riding lawnmowers. That's a 1-to-4 ratio. Because I'm spending 4 more time in the assembly process for riding lawnmowers than I am in snowmobiles. It's good information to know. So with distortion costs, there are 2 conditions. First is the difference between the product department factory overhead rates. The second is the difference in the ratios among the base usage. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, activity-based costing. This is the third method and the most accurate method. Activity-based costing is based on the alternative approaches to allocating factory overhead rate. And we do this based on different activities. Activities are identified as types of work, actions, or involvement in manufacturing. I typically identify this as being actions based on activity drivers or activity cost pools. Activity cost pools are costs that are lumped together based off of their similarities. Example of this would be machine usage, inspections, moving, product setups, engineering activities. And this is different than allocating costs based off of their individual departments that we learned about in the earlier method. In the multiple production department method, we learned how to allocate overhead based off of each respective department. Now we're going to look at how to allocate overhead based off of each individual activity. In our business, Ruiz company, that we manufacture snowmobiles and riding lawnmowers, there are two core activities, primary activities that we have. One is fabrication, the other one is assembly. These are our core activities. These are the things we do the most, core activities. As you recall, we have a total budget of overhead of $1.6 million. We assign these to our activities. We also have a few other activities that are derived from our core activities. One is called setup. Setup is the setup process of the assembly line. We're setting up the machines, we're oiling them, getting them ready to go. So we're setting it up, right? Another activity is called quality control inspections. In this process, what we do is we break down the completed product and rebuild it to identify any errors in quality. It's called quality control inspections. Another activity we perform is called engineering changes. In this activity, we are making modifications to the design process, to the design of our finished good, based off of our needs to change the product. An example would be, we went from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 11. There were engineering changes that were made in that process, that activity. Those engineering changes were an upgraded chip, an upgraded whatever. There's costs associated with that process. And so each activity is assigned a part of our total budget. Fabrication, we allocated $530,000, for assembly $70,000, giving us total core activities of $600,000 allocation. The other $1 million was allocated to setup, quality control inspections, and engineering. $480,000 to setup, $312,000 to quality control, and $280,000 to engineering. Within each activity, we need to find the activity rate. Okay? The activity rate is found by taking the budgeted activity cost divided by the total activity base usage. Activity base means how we are using that activity. And the activity base is usually based off of like labor hours, labor dollars, it's the usage, right, of that cost. So let's take a look at our company, and let's go through a couple of examples. So we have the following information. Again, every year our company produces 1,000 snowmobiles, 1,000 riding lawnmowers. That we knew. we estimate that we'll need to do 100 setups for snowmobiles and 20 setups for riding lawnmowers. We'll do 100 inspections for snowmobiles and 4 inspections for riding lawnmowers. That's quality control inspections. And we will issue 12 change orders for snowmobiles and 4 change orders for riding lawnmowers. Change orders are the engineering change orders. That helps us to improve the product over time. So how does it work? We need to find the activity rates. For snowmobile fabrication, it's 8 hours. Riding lawnmower fabrication, it's 2 hours. Snowmobile assembly is 2 hours. Riding lawnmower assembly is 8 hours. We're going to produce 1,000 units. We're going to allocate 10,000 labor hours for assembly, 10,000 labor hours for the fabrication. And so what we do is we first add everything up. Our activity-based usage, we're going to do 120 total setups, 104 inspections, and 16 engineering change orders. We take the activity-based cost divided by the total activity-based usage to get the activity rate. Fabrication, 530,000 divided by 10,000 labor hours is $53. Assembly, 70,000 budgeted for assembly, divided by 10,000 labor hours, it's $7 per hour. Setups, 480,000 allocated to setups, divided by 120 total setups, that's 4,000 per setup. Quality control inspections, 312 divided by 104 equals 3,000 per inspection. For engineering change orders, 208 divided by 16 gives you 13,000 per engineering change order. So now we found our activity rates. Okay? Once we found our activity rates, we can then find the activity overhead allocation. And to do that, we take the activity-based usage times the activity rate. Okay. To find the factory overhead product, we take the sum of the product's individual activity allocations to find the factory overhead cost per unit. To find the activity overhead cost per unit, we take the total factory overhead cost divided by the total units of estimated production. Okay. Here's how it works. We found our activity cost by taking the activity-based usage times the activity rate. We do that for each product, okay, each product. We add up all of our activity costs for the snowmobile. Fabrication, 424,000. Assembly, 14. Setup, 400. Quality control, 300. Engineering changes, 156. To get us a total of 1,294,000 for factory overhead costs for snowmobiles. We're going to produce 1,000 snowmobiles. So we take the 1,294,000 divided by 1,000 snowmobiles. Gives us a total factory overhead per snowmobile of 1,294,000. We apply the same process for the riding lawnmowers. For the riding lawnmowers, the total factory overhead cost is $306,000. We're going to produce 1,000 riding lawnmowers. That gives us a total factory overhead per unit of $306 per riding lawnmower. This is how we got there. Make sense? Good so far? And as we compare the 3 methods of allocating factory overhead, we can see that the most accurate method is the activity-based costing method. 1,294 allocated to snowmobiles, 306 compared to riding lawnmowers. Of course, you compare the three to identify the most effective. Looking back at the single plant-wide rate, it was $800. It's the same regardless of the type of product being produced. The nice thing is that that's easy, but it has its disadvantages. Disadvantages is it's understated factory overhead for snowmobiles and overstated for lawnmowers. It can result in an increase in sales and a decrease in sales for each unit depending on the under allocation or over allocation. And the limitations is that it could prevent the company from expanding, and it could also cause us to cease production of one product based off of the allocation. With activity-based costing, it's the most accurate method for pricing, and it helps us to make proper pricing decisions to get the most profit out of the sale of each unit. Activity-based costing is produced according to GAAP for selling administrative expenses. As you know, their selling administrative expenses are reported on the income statement as period expenses, just as it always has been. Selling administrative expenses may be allocated to the products for decision making, but for GAAP accounting, they must be allocated as period expenses on the income statement. This kind of just shows you, for example, the different type of selling administrative activities that can be allocated based off of activity-based costing to individual products. And that is for management use only. For reporting purposes, if it's according to GAAP, it needs to be based on the income statement as period expenses. This kind of shows us how the allocation of selling administrative expenses has an impact on the overall cost, how it can be misleading. But you could take the selling administrative expenses activities and apply an activity rate to those related activity-based costs for selling administrative expenses by taking the total budgeted activity cost divided by the total activity-based usage. For example, if we did it for warranties in this example, you would take the budgeted warranty claim expense divided by the total estimated warranty claims, giving us $59 per warranty claim, just as an example. And you can do that per product, of course. It works the same exact way. That just kind of shows you how it would work in a service as well. Any questions, comments, concerns? Anything at all? Activity-based costing. We're good? Really? Everything's good? You all got it? You all got it down? Experts now? Okay. Now, as a reminder, what's going on this week? What's due? When's it due? Two things. One, we are in module 1, week 2. You have the chapter 17 quiz that's based on process-based costing. And you have a chapter 18 discussion board. The discussion board is based off of activity-based costing. You get 2 chances at each quiz. For the discussion board, remember, each discussion board is worth 5% of your total grade. Okay? Please make sure that you participate in every discussion board. There are 4 of them in this class. That means all discussion boards are worth 20% of your total grade. That's a lot, okay? Each discussion, original post, 150 words roughly. follow Alexa as the example. She did a wonderful job at this. She got a couple paragraphs here. She even has a reference at the bottom. Now what Alexa needs to do is she needs to respond to two of her classmates using that same process. Okay, a paragraph or two with a reference response to two of your classmates. That will get 5 total points. Okay, full paragraphs. Make sure your grammar and spelling is correct, please. Make sure that it's in paragraph form, not bullets. Paragraph form. One initial response to the discussion prompt and 2 responses to your classmates. That will get you to 5 points. Any questions on that? Makes sense, right? You're all still there? Are you all still awake? Okay.
We are.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. Any questions at all before we wrap up? We're good? Okay. You all know what you need to do. My advice to you is do your first discussion response on Thursday night. That way it'll give you time to respond to 2 of your classmates. That's the best way. That's the best approach for discussion boards. If you have any questions, you need any help at all, you just let me know. I'm here for you. In the meantime, stay safe. Wash your hands. Do the right things. And if you need anything, just reach out to me, okay? I'll respond to your emails as quick as I can. I'm always here for you. Thank you all so very much for your time.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, y'all.